Welcome. Today we will delve into the secrets of the technological revolution that changed the course of World War II. A story about how invisible communication weapons determined the fate of the fronts. In 1943, amid the battles in North Africa, American Sherman tanks equipped with the latest radio stations operated with such precision and coordination that German commanders could not understand how it was possible. At the same time, German Panthers, despite their superiority in armor and armament, faced an inability to establish reliable communication, and this became their weak link. How did it happen that technological superiority and firepower was offset by a lack of communication? Why did enemies realize so late that an invisible electromagnetic bridge, radio communication, was deciding the outcome of the battle? Today we will reveal how, in the era of war, radio systems became the key to victory, and why it was precisely in this invisible sphere that the fates of millions of armies were decided. Are you ready to see what lies behind the sounds of radio transmitters and how they changed history? Then let's begin. In the cold shadows of history, amidst the ruins and dusty roads of North Africa, lies one of the most mysterious and misunderstood pages of World War II. The myth of the invincibility of German tanks, their legendary armor and deadly weaponry, has long been entrenched in the consciousness of many researchers and military history enthusiasts. However, behind this illusion often remains an invisible but extremely important side: the role of communications, which in fact determined the outcome of many battles. It was precisely the invisible network of radio signals, transmitted behind the lines and on the battlefield, that became the hidden factor capable of destroying the myth of the technical superiority of German armored vehicles. And if we speak honestly, communications were no less important, and often even more decisive, than armor or artillery in military success. Let's go back to that era, to that very February day, when in the Kasserine Pass area in Tunisia, amidst raging sands and wrecked vehicles, events unfolded that at first glance seemed trivial. American Sherman tanks, initially perceived as relatively simple, mass-produced machines, suddenly began to demonstrate astonishing tactical flexibility. They moved, changed positions, created an illusion of elusiveness, all without visible signals. Testimonies from witnesses show that American commanders used FM radios with crystal generators, ensuring precise and stable communication. Meanwhile, German Panthers, more modern, more powerful, and better armored, suffered from communication issues. Their Fuji 5 radios and other systems often malfunctioned, creating noise and interfering with command. What really happened? Why do some vehicles, seemingly inferior in armor and armament, win in maneuverability and tactical flexibility? The answer lies in the communication system. In 1940, when the United States finally standardized radio stations of the SCR 508, SCR 528, and SCR 538 types created by Motorola, a revolution began. These devices were not just radios. They represented a complete technological breakthrough. They used FM technology, frequency modulation, which eliminated static noise and interference, making voice signals clear and intelligible, even in conditions of strong radio interference. The entire communication system became more reliable, accurate, and powerful. This meant that commanders could instantly transmit orders, adjust tactics in real time, and coordinate the actions of entire battalions. At the same time, on other fronts, German engineers and tacticians faced different challenges. Their systems, based on amplitude modulation, were less resistant to interference and, more importantly, had a shorter transmission range. As a result, German armored vehicles became vulnerable not only physically, but also informationally. The loss of a command tank, its radio system, or even a weak signal could lead to the disorganization of the entire combat group. Simply put, even the most powerful tank, if it cannot communicate with its neighbor, becomes a solitary, vulnerable object. Moreover, German command vehicles and their radio systems were limited in functionality. Their radios were heavy, bulky, installation required time, and the quality of communication left much to be desired. In critical moments of battle, when every second counts and the situation changes at lightning speed, the absence of reliable communication channels became a deadly oversight. German commanders often could not relay orders to their tanks or change tactics when the situation demanded immediate decisions. As a result, despite their superiority in armor and armament, their tanks ended up disorganized, vulnerable, and ultimately defeated. By mid-war, American armored vehicles were fully equipped with the most advanced radio stations. In every Sherman, every command and combat tank, there was a communication system that transformed them into a unified combat node. Communication became not just a tool, but a weapon, capable of ensuring synchronization and coordination that even the most powerful German machines could not match. In the fast-paced conditions of combat, where command had to make instant decisions, this invisible network of radio signals became a key element of victory. And here arises the main question lingering in the air. Why, despite its superiority in armor and armament, did German armored vehicles turn out to be so vulnerable? Why, despite technological advancements, were they unable to ensure the same cohesion and operational efficiency as the Americans? What is the root of this discrepancy? The answer lies in the fact that in a military conflict, as in any complex system, it is not only the material from which a tank is made that matters, but also its ability to interact, exchange information, and manage combat in real time. This capability, an invisible but extremely important factor, ended up in the hands of the enemy. Finally, the question arises, how did invisible technological superiority in communications ensure victory in key battles? Why did the enemies primarily underestimate the role and quality of radio signals? Why did they realize too late that communications are the thread that connects all elements of a combat machine, transforming it from a set of separate parts into a unified whole? Answers to these questions will help us understand not only the course of history, but also the universal laws of war, which often remain invisible to the eye, but ultimately determine the outcome of a battle. Ultimately, history teaches us that technological superiority is only half the battle. The real weapon is the ability to effectively utilize these technologies, manage information, and create a network capable of coordinating and amplifying combat actions. This invisible yet powerful force is the key to victory. When war becomes something more than just a clash of armies and strategies, new invisible players, communication systems, enter the game. At the heart of this revolution is American industry, which despite all the difficulties and challenges of the time, developed a unique, standardized, and mass-produced radio communication system capable of changing the face of combat. How did this happen? How could engineering solutions embodied in metal casings and electronic circuits become as important as tanks or aircraft? And why did this invisible network ultimately become the key to victory, determining the outcome of the greatest battles of the 20th century? At the beginning of this path were the first steps, which seemed small but held enormous potential. In November 1942, when the Allies launched Operation Torch, a large-scale landing in North Africa, American tanks were already equipped with radio stations. But not just any radio stations. New, revolutionary devices, SCR-508 radio systems, were adopted. This model became a symbol of American technological superiority in the earliest stages of the campaign. Imagine a heavy tank moving across a desert plain, its hull vibrating under the sounds of a roaring engine, and inside, a device capable of transmitting and receiving signals that are resistant to interference. This was a real technological breakthrough that allowed the commander to control his unit with precision and speed previously unavailable. The breakthrough came the following year, when American industry sharply increased the production of radio systems. In 1943, more than 11,400 radio stations were produced, and this was only the beginning. In the following year, production more than doubled, surpassing 20,000 units. These figures are not just statistics, they embody the scale and efficiency of American industry, capable of providing the entire army with necessary equipment in the shortest possible time. Each radio station installed on Sherman tanks became part of a vast network that covered every unit, every brigade, every company. As a result, the command team was able not just to respond to the situation, but to anticipate and control it as a unified organism. From a technical perspective, it is important to understand that these were not merely devices. Each radio station weighed about 200 pounds, a reminder of the weight of this weapon. Inside were approximately 2,500 components, complex and finely tuned to operate under the harshest conditions. Despite their mass, they exhibited remarkable stability. The frequency could deviate by no more than 1/100%. This meant that in the chaos of battle, amidst explosions, gunfire, and electromagnetic interference, communication remained reliable. There were no longer static noises that hindered command, nor errors caused by sudden disruptions. Instead, there was a clear, crisp connection, enabling battlefield management at ranges of 10 or 15 miles. This was a vast, almost invisible bridge connecting commanders with their units, creating a unified system of control and coordination. In 1943, when Americans fully equipped their tanks with radio systems, totaling 49,324 Shermans, it was not just a technological achievement, it became a strategic advantage. For the first time in wartime history, the armed forces of one country could ensure complete radio communication across their entire tank army. Communication ceased to be a weak link, transformed from a vulnerability into an integral part of combat tactics, a foundation for rapid response and flexible coordination. All of this was made possible through systems, mass production, standardization, and precise component matching. The organization of radio system manufacturing was a true engineering and logistical miracle. The era when each device was handcrafted gave way to mass production across the entire industrial system. Factories located in different states operated as a single mechanism. Standardization ensured compatibility, while strict technical requirements guaranteed reliability. As a result, every tank, every command post, every radio station became part of a unified, standardized system. This unified platform not only accelerated production, but also enabled rapid information exchange in combat conditions and instant reaction to changing circumstances. In wartime, where every second could be decisive, this was critically important. Analysis shows that it was precisely standardization and compatibility that formed the foundation for quick response and coordinated actions. Part 5 of 16. In military strategy, this is like having a well-tuned organ within the body, ready for instant action. It was this invisible, yet incredibly powerful network of connections that became a key factor, enabling American troops to dominate the battlefield. Communication became an inseparable part of the weaponry, a new force capable of changing the outcome of battles in the blink of an eye. So, the question arises, how was it possible, in conditions of total war, when resources and time were running out, for American industry to create such a system? How did engineers, working under strict requirements and constant deadlines, manage to build this engineering marvel? The answer lies in one thing: faith in the power of standardization, mass production, and flawless technological planning. These factors allowed for the unprecedented scale and efficiency of the communication system, which became an invisible, yet powerful weapon. Why did communication systems become as important as armament? Why did they determine the outcome of battles and change the nature of war? The answer is that without reliable and rapid communication, there would be no tactics or strategy. Without a communication system, any success turns into chaos, and any operation into a risk. But American industry and engineers created not just equipment, they laid the foundation for a new kind of war. A war where information and communication held equal weight with weapons, and sometimes even surpassed them. This revolution in communications forever changed the face of combat, making it faster, more precise, and more deadly. And it was this invisible network that became the decisive factor, determining who would emerge victorious from the bloodiest era in human history. During those years, when war was becoming more global and brutal, when every decision could be decisive and every minute critical, the role of radio communication in combat took on critical importance. At the moment when the dust had not yet settled after the first shots, and the fate of the fronts was not yet sealed, it was communication technologies that began to play a role as powerful as armor or artillery. In this context, a special significance is given to the story of how radio systems, like invisible threads, connected commanders, tanks, and infantry into a single organism, transforming simple messages into strategic trump cards that changed the course of battles. The story begins with Operation Turk, a large-scale operation that marked a new era in the tactics of American forces. Here, on the front lines, in the heat of battle, American tanks equipped with SCR-508 radio systems first demonstrated their strength. These systems were not just means of communication. They became the brain, heart, and nervous system of the entire mechanized army. Compared to the German FUG-5 systems, which already appeared outdated at first glance, the SCR-508 demonstrated advantages that could be felt even by ear. A greater operational range, less susceptibility to interference, and signal stability. The moment tanks operated as a cohesive unit, when commanders could issue orders without fear of signal loss or distortion, that was true technological superiority. But this difference was not only evident in Africa, not only in the North African desert, where American forces first tested their systems in real combat conditions. In Italy, in September 1943, the rugged terrain of mountain ridges and narrow valleys seemed destined to become an insurmountable barrier for modern communication systems. However, American tanks equipped with FM radios proved that, even in the challenging environment of mountain gorges, they could maintain close coordination. Communications were uninterrupted, allowing commands to respond instantly to changing circumstances and transmit information about the enemy and their positions. Meanwhile, German systems, the FUG-5, degraded, became useless, their range shortened, signals distorted, and the ability to maintain communication almost entirely lost. Under these conditions, American radio systems became tools of strategic flexibility, enabling command posts to manage battalions in difficult mountainous terrain, where such coordination previously seemed impossible. Moving to the western coast of France, in Normandy, June 6, 1944, D-Day, the day when Europe's fate was decided on the shores of the English Channel. At that moment, when thousands of soldiers stormed impregnable fortifications, their success largely depended on the reliability of radio communication. American tanks supporting the landing and naval artillery became not just combat vehicles. They became the vital link without which a coordinated offensive would have been impossible. In an environment where German systems still operated but could not provide the necessary speed and accuracy of data transmission, American radio networks functioned flawlessly. Communication allowed command posts to give operational directives, adjust fire, and respond to emerging threats. This capability, based on technological superiority, literally transformed the perception of rapid response and battlefield organization. Later, in July 1944, during the Battle of Bloxhaug, one of the most intense and bloody moments of the war, American radio systems reached new heights. Over 400 tanks, interconnected into a single network, operated as a unified organism. Response times to threats were reduced to just a few minutes. German counterattacks, often sudden and powerful, could be repelled thanks to rapid information exchange between tanks and command posts. Even at that time, German systems could not provide such speed and reliability of communication. Their networks were fragmented, vulnerable, and often subject to interference and interception. As a result, American forces were not just able to respond, they could anticipate, act, and encircle the enemy. The culmination of this technological superiority was the Battle of Argonne, when American tanks equipped with advanced radio systems could respond to threats within minutes. A response time of 3 to 5 minutes versus 20 or 30 was the difference between victory and defeat. Communication became not just a tool for coordination, but a means of strategic dominance. In conditions where German systems could no longer provide the necessary speed and accuracy for transmitting command signals, American radio networks became an undeniable advantage. They aided not only in organizing defenses, but also in active offensive operations, allowing rapid encirclement and destruction of the enemy, executing maneuvers that previously seemed impossible. Analysis shows that even in the 1930s, when German communication systems were only emerging, they failed to provide the level of efficiency required for modern combat. Their systems were outdated, poorly protected, and vulnerable to radio signals and interference. This led to strategic and tactical miscalculations that cost the Germans dearly. In a war where every minute could be critical, weak communication meant weakness, and weakness meant defeat. The question that remains is, how exactly did technological advantages in communications transform tactical superiority? Why were enemies, even with their own systems and theories, not able to quickly adapt and neutralize this advantage? The answer lies in the inability of German systems to keep pace with the development of Allied communication technologies. Their doctrines, based on outdated principles, did not account for the need for fast, reliable, and secure communication. Meanwhile, the Americans invested in developing technologies, improved their systems, and created networks that functioned as a single organism. They understood, in modern combat, communication determines the outcome. German resistance was not only a struggle over equipment, but also over ideas, over the concept of warfare, which proved outdated in an era where command and control became decisive. Could German systems and doctrines have won through the development of their own communication technology? Or, as history shows, was it ultimately technological superiority, supported by strategy and tactics, that proved decisive? The answer is clear. In a war where every moment counts, it is technology, specifically the ability to exchange information quickly, that determines the winner. Despite their achievements in other areas, the Germans found themselves in a chasing position because their communication systems could not provide the speed and reliability required for modern combat. As a result, even the strongest and best prepared troops were unable to compensate for the lack of communication, which ultimately led to their strategic defeat. History shows that in the war of technology, in the struggle for information, communication becomes the weapon capable of overturning all strategic and tactical assumptions. Those who possessed the best systems, namely the Americans, gained not just an advantage, but a chance to change the course of history. The question remains open. If the Germans had been able to develop their communication systems as quickly and effectively, would they have been able to resist or even win? Or perhaps it was precisely technological superiority, with its obvious and evidently significant advantages, that became the decisive force forever altering the face of warfare. In military history, as in any other sphere of human conflict, success is often determined not only by the number of troops or the power of weapons, but also by how quickly and accurately commands can be transmitted, and how information is processed and acted upon. During the era of large-scale battles in Europe, when the fate of the continent was decided on the battlefield, communication technologies began to play a role previously thought unattainable. These invisible threads, connecting commanders with their armies, allowed for the coordination of complex operations, the management of thousands of units of equipment, and decision-making under conditions where time became the most valuable resource. It was these technologies, integrated into the strategic operations of World War II, that demonstrated how the power of communication could determine the outcome of even the largest and bloodiest battles. Operation Cobra, carried out in July 1944, stands as one of the most vivid examples of this. At the center of events were American radio systems, which allowed the coordination of vast forces, hundreds of tanks, artillery pieces, and infantry, into a unified, synchronized machine. These communication systems functioned like a nervous system, transmitting commands and intelligence at speeds inaccessible to the enemy. The entire operation was built on precise and rapid information exchange, enabling the suppression of German defensive lines, creating chaos within their ranks, and achieving success with minimal losses. Communication became the key to speed, surprise, and control of the battlefield. Slightly later, in March 1945, during the Battle of the Rhine, the role of radio communication became even more evident. In conditions of rapid advances, when the front line changed its configuration almost minute by minute, the ability to respond swiftly to changes proved decisive. American commanders used radio networks for quick reactions, reorganizing their forces and orchestrating double encirclements of German troops. Communication acted like an invisible hand, guiding tanks, artillery, and infantry, setting traps, and ensuring continuous interaction between units. In this battle, where every moment could be the last, it was the instant transmission of intelligence and command orders that ensured superiority. By April 1945, in the encirclement of Reims, American radio networks became even more crucial. Real-time intelligence transmission, coordination of offensive and defensive actions, rapid response to any changes. All of this became possible thanks to an established communication system. The communication reduced reaction times, lowered troop losses, and accelerated the advance toward the final goal, victory. The entire chain, from reconnaissance to direct command, worked as a cohesive whole, where every second mattered and each transmission could be decisive. However, in this context, it is also important to understand that not everything was always smooth. While the Allies were equipping themselves with modern radio systems, the German command faced a radically different situation. Their communication lines were destroyed, cut off, often deliberately eliminated. As a result, the lines of communication that were supposed to connect commanders and soldiers turned into frayed threads, incapable of providing effective troop management. This created chaos, disorganization, and vulnerability. The German forces became victims of their own short-sightedness. Instead of investing in modern communication systems, they bet on armor, artillery, and infantry, underestimating the importance of informational support. Their command continued to build fortifications and strengthen defenses, relying on traditional methods, while the enemy used technology to preempt, bypass, and destroy. Analysis shows that this technological gap was one of the decisive factors. American tactics based on rapid information exchange were not just words or strategy. They were a weapon that allowed them to leverage numerical and technical advantages. Communication became an invisible front in the battle for supremacy, often even more important than direct armament. In the final battles, victory went to those who could transmit and receive information faster, who managed to maintain the integrity of their communication lines and use them to command their troops. In this context, a question arises with increasing insistence. Why could German strategy, their doctrine, and their approach to warfare not compensate for this technological gap? Why did they underestimate the importance of communication, considering it a secondary component, and focus instead on strengthening armament and armored vehicles? After all, the better the weapon, the higher the chances of victory. But it is precisely in this underestimation that the essence lies, because without a reliable communication system, even the most powerful weapons become a useless burden. Part 10 of 16. The German command continued to build defenses, strengthen tank corps, and reinforce artillery divisions, paying no attention to the fact that without communication, their actions turned into chaos and their troops into wounded and scattered groups unable to operate cohesively and effectively. In contrast, American tactics focused on rapid information exchange and the creation of networks that united all front elements into a single whole. This allowed them not just to respond to events, but to anticipate them. They exploited advantages in numbers and equipment, but most importantly, They harnessed the power of communications to manage this advantage. In the final battles, in the decisive stage of the struggle for dominance, victory was achieved not only through superior armament or numbers, it was won through superior network connectivity, faster data transmission, and remote command capabilities. The key question then arises: can we consider communications the main weapon in modern warfare? Is it possible to assert that superiority in communication technologies and information exchange becomes a decisive factor, surpassing even firepower? After all, if we look at the history of this period, it was precisely communication, the information chains, that proved to be the invisible front determining the winner. In an era where data transmission speed can decide the outcome of a battle and timely intelligence can save lives and resources, it becomes clear that communications are no longer just an auxiliary element. They have transformed into the main weapon, a strategic force capable of changing the course of history. The main lesson and the greatest mystery to solve are: what technologies will become the next frontiers, and how will they alter the balance of power in future conflicts? It was radio communication, introduced in the 1940s, that became an invisible but powerful framework upon which all modern tactics and strategies of combat were built. During that fateful era, when the world stood on the brink of a large-scale conflict, American engineers and military leaders decided not to limit themselves to just firepower or outdated command and control methods. They created a system that allowed tanks, infantry, artillery, and air forces to operate as a single, coordinated unit, quickly, flexibly, and synchronously. It was these radio systems, such as the widely used SCR-508 during the war, that laid the foundation for new tactical concepts, so-called combat groups capable of reacting to changing circumstances in seconds, reconfiguring mid-battle, changing direction, tactics, and even strategy. All of this became possible thanks to a simple yet brilliant idea: commanding and controlling not through traditional streets and signal flags, but through the air, via radio, transmitting orders instantly and receiving reports in real time. In battles across Europe, where destinies were decided on the battlefield, American tanks equipped with radio systems demonstrated remarkable results. They were not merely armored vehicles with guns. They transformed into mobile command centers, living computers, brains capable of instant thinking and speaking. Imagine, a fight is underway. The situation is changing. The enemy approaches from the flank, and the American tank immediately adjusts its tactics. It receives commands transmitted via radio signal and, like a living organism, adapts. At the same time, deep in the rear areas, commanders monitored maps, analyzed data received by radio, and issued new orders. This instant communication, this ability to react and reconfigure immediately, became the key to victory in complex combat conditions. And it wasn't only the Americans who noticed this effect. Post-war studies show that Germans and Soviet military forces, seeing the effectiveness of American systems, began copying them, developing their own versions, and standardizing communication systems based on the proven model. In the post-war years, both countries developed their own versions of radio systems, standardized according to common standards, which allowed the creation of a unified, large-scale network of command posts and units. This was not just a technical upgrade. It was a step toward a new military paradigm. Standardization of communication systems and their integration into the overall tactical structure meant that troops could now operate more cohesively, more efficiently, and more flexibly. War ceased to be merely a clash of forces. It became a game of information, speed, and synchronization. The culmination of this process was an era when radio communication became the foundation of modern military strategy. In the 1990s, during Operation Desert Storm, American forces demonstrated this in practice. They first showed that war is not only about shooting and explosions. It is a network that connects all components of combat operations. The American C4ISR system is not just a set of commands and sensors. It is a living, dynamic organism that collects, processes, and disseminates information in real time. In this sense, all tactics came to depend on networked interaction, rapid data transmission, and the ability to see the entire situation and manage it. Thanks to these technologies, American troops gained an advantage that was difficult for opponents to overcome. In the 21st century, modern combat vehicles are not just metal monsters with guns and missiles. They are integrated systems, combining weaponry, navigation, and most importantly, communication. They embody the legacy and experience accumulated since the first introduction of radio systems for tanks. Today, systems like SCR-508 and their successors enable combat operations in highly information-saturated environments, managing hundreds of units over vast distances, and receiving and transmitting critically important data in fractions of a second. Without this communication foundation, without the technologies that emerged in the 1940s, modern warfare would simply be impossible. It has evolved into a complex game of networks, algorithms, and rapid information exchange. A game where victory goes to those who are faster, more precise, and more synchronized. This is no coincidence. It was the integration of radio technology in the 1940s that laid the groundwork for the modern concept of network combat. The entire journey from simple radio signals to advanced data transmission systems is a story of how warfare management was elevated to a new level. It is a story of how technology transformed the nature of conflict, turning it from a clash of forces into a game of information. And the question remains, could modern wars have been as effective without the implementation of these communication technologies? Could an army armed only with firepower and outdated command methods compete in an environment where the speed of information transfer became critical? The answer is obvious: no. Without radio systems and networked interaction, modern warfare would be a different, much less effective and less dynamic game. And it is this invisible yet powerful thread, communication, that became the foundation upon which the entire structure of modern military operations was built. In the distant year 1943, when the war had already passed its midpoint, when smoke and flames filled the front lines, and the fates of millions were decided in moments, the question of communication suddenly became one of the key issues. But who took it seriously? Who looked into this seemingly technical aspect capable of changing the course of history? The German army, renowned for its technology and organization, faced an internal problem that seemed to remain behind the scenes of the larger drama. Tank production was in full swing, with millions of chassis and hundreds of thousands of weapons, creating an illusion of power and invincibility. But even amidst this sea of metal, amidst this industrial fury, there was a flaw that could determine the entire outcome of the war: a lack of effective communication systems. In 1943, Germany produced about 5,500 medium tanks, but fewer than 2,000 of them were equipped with full-fledged FUG fifth-generation radio stations capable of ensuring battlefield communication. And these scarce systems, like wounded birds, fought for their survival in the battle for communication. Communication is not just words. It is the heart of command and control, the blood that sustains the vitality and coordination of combat operations. If it is absent or unreliable, the entire structure and tactics turn into a fragile house of cards, ready to collapse at the first gust of battle. While German commanders in their command posts tried to hold the reins of control, millions of soldiers on the fields and in the forests, deep in bunkers, remained cut off from communication, chained to their machines. Techniques and engineers knew, when a radio station breaks down or is completely absent, command turns into a blind man who cannot see the enemy, cannot hear orders from above, and cannot respond in a timely manner. This is a tragedy that manifested itself in every battle, in every loss, and in every defeat. Communication is not just technology, it is the boundary between victory and defeat, between life and death. And in this race for technological superiority, Germany found itself behind. There were years when the Soviet army often entered combat without radio communication, relying only on oral orders or gestures. But it was precisely the absence of a communication system that revealed the vulnerability of Soviet troops. In battles on the Eastern Front, amid chaos and uncertainty, the lack of radio signals turned into chaos in command, loss of control, and often deadly danger for entire units. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, the Americans were taking steps toward the future. In 1943, the United States equipped their Sherman tanks with modern radio systems. This was not just technological progress, it was a strategic leap that seemingly made them invincible in command and control. At the same time, German industry, despite its technological achievements, could not fully meet the demand for radio stations. Production capacities, worn-out equipment, and material shortages all exacerbated the gap. As a result, by 1945, when the war was nearing its end, German tanks and soldiers remained practically without communication, making them vulnerable, blind, and deaf to command decisions. Post-war studies unequivocally confirmed equipment produced in Germany was 5 to 7 years behind the technological achievements of the Allies. These are not just numbers, they are facts that speak to the scale of technological lag, showing how outdated systems became a deadly burden for German forces. In this context, Soviet military leaders began to take their own steps. Recognizing the critical importance of communication, they started copying and adapting American systems. As German technological superiority diminished, Soviet engineers and tacticians understood, to catch up and surpass the enemy, it is not only about numerical superiority or armor, but also about communication. It became the key element of modernization, the guarantee that Soviet tanks and infantry could operate cohesively, respond quickly, and make decisions in combat conditions. In this process of copying and adaptation, in this technological leap, lay hope for changing the game, for correcting the main weakness, the communication system, which could determine the outcome of the entire campaign. But the main question remains, why did the communication systems for German and Soviet armored troops turn out to be so weak? Why did this infrastructure, which was supposed to connect commanders with soldiers, become a weak link, an Achilles heel that could undermine all strategic plans? Why, despite unprecedented efforts, technological advancements, and industrial might, did communications turn out to be so critical? And most importantly, could victory have been achieved without improving the communication system? Was this an inevitable technological lag, or the result of strategic choices, missed opportunities, and mistakes? These questions are not merely technical or tactical. They are the key to understanding the entire tragedy and the lessons this war left behind. Ultimately, the outcome of a battle is decided not only by armor and firepower, but also by what happens inside command posts, in the wiring of radios, in the minds of engineers and leaders. In these delicate threads, in these invisible connections, lies the essence of war, impossible to win without reliable communications. And so we ask ourselves, was it possible to win without enhancing the communication systems? Or would it have been like fighting in a dark room, relying only on instinct? Are we facing an unavoidable technological lag, or is it the result of errors, missed opportunities, and poor decisions? This is the main conceptual turning point. To understand whether this war could have ended differently if the communication systems had been developed and perfected. Or was it precisely their weakness that became one of the key factors determining the fate of millions? Because, in the end, war is not only a battle of technology and forces, but also a struggle for communication, for the ability to hear and be heard. In this struggle, in this invisible duel, the outcome is decided not only by a single campaign, but also by lessons for future generations. Deep in history, in the flames of the Second World War, a revolution was born that forever changed the face of combat. It was then, in the shadow of bloody battles, that the first signals of a new era sounded, an era when communications ceased to be merely a tool of exchange and became a powerful weapon. American radio systems such as the SCR-508 became not just means of transmitting information, but key elements of strategic victory. determining the outcome of battles and laying the foundations of modern military tactics. These systems, developed in the 1940s, did not merely serve as communication tools. They created a concept where every unit, every tank, every aircraft could operate in unison, like a single organism, controlled by invisible threads of information. After the war, this technology did not disappear. On the contrary, it became a catalytic element for modernizing armies around the world. European countries and the Soviet Union adopted systems similar to the SCR-508, integrating them into their forces. It was a time when the boundaries between reconnaissance, command, and combat blurred. Communication became an integral part of tactical schemes, the foundation upon which a new military doctrine was built. Technologies developed in the United States have become a model, a standard that set the tone for the entire world. They did not merely facilitate message transmission. They created a battlefield where information became a weapon, and its timeliness and accuracy could determine the outcome of any operation. The 1990s arrived, and a world transformed after the Cold War witnessed a new milestone in the evolution of military communications. During Operation Desert Storm, American communication systems demonstrated their absolute superiority. For the first time in warfare history, commanders and operators had access to real-time information. Cartographic data, intelligence, tactical directives were transmitted instantly, without delays or errors. This was not just an upgrade, it was a revolutionary leap that changed the perception of the Army's capabilities. The entire world saw how communication technologies evolved into a strategic factor, transforming military action into a coordinated, synchronized mechanism. Within a few years, by 2003, American C-4 ISR systems, command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, and reconnaissance, became the foundation for controlling and coordinating combat operations on a global scale. Enemies were powerless against these technologies. They could not intercept, hack, or destroy the communication links that provided American forces not only with an advantage, but with absolute control. These systems enabled the creation of what is known as network-centric warfare, a war based on a network that unites all elements of the armed forces into a single information system, where each component is connected through invisible data threads, ensuring instant reaction and maximum accuracy. Modern combat vehicles, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, drones, all inherited the principles established in the 1940s. Standardization, versatility, and the ability to integrate became the cornerstones of their design. The greatness of these technologies lies not only in their technical complexity, but also in their capacity to become part of a unified system, where each link plays its role. This was made possible precisely because of the foundation laid during World War II. But technological progress alone does not confirm the importance of communication as a weapon. In the conflicts of the 20th and 21st centuries, in Iraq and Afghanistan, the consequences of informational superiority are clearly evident. Where some have access to instant intelligence, others do not. Where communications are reliable and secure, battlefield successes become apparent. Communication ceases to be merely a means of interaction. It turns into a decisive factor that determines the outcome of battles, the fate of nations, and strategic victories. This paradigm, where communication is a weapon, drives the development of new technologies, cybersecurity, satellite communications, information protection systems. All of these now form the arsenal of modern warfare. In an era when every second and every byte of data can be decisive, understanding the importance of informational superiority becomes a matter of survival. The history of American radio systems, which began in the 1940s, is not just about technological development. It is the foundation upon which the concept of modern warfare is built. Network-centric warfare, so often discussed today, is not merely words. It reflects the lessons learned from bloody battles of the past. It was during those dark years that the understanding was established that the future belongs to communication, information, and the ability to control the battlefield in the invisible domain. And the question that remains relevant today is, how do the lessons of the past shape our strategies, technologies, tactics, and the tactics of the future? Could modern wars have been possible without the military communication revolution that began in the 1940s? Without those early, seemingly simple radio systems that, in reality, marked the beginning of a new era? The answer is obvious. Without them, modern conflicts would likely be impossible. Without them, there would be no tactics, no strategies, no technologies that today determine the outcome of combat engagements. This is a legacy that lives on and evolves, continuing in each new generation of armed forces, in every new technology, and in every upgrade of communication systems. History shows that the revolution in military communications is the foundation, the bedrock, without which understanding modern warfare is impossible. Every new development, every technological achievement is a continuation of the great evolution that began in the 1940s. And if we do not learn from the lessons of the past, if we do not realize that communication has become the weapon of the future, we risk being at a disadvantage in the battle for the future.